Welcome to the AuSPEC Awards FAQ video. This is going to be a little video where we try and do our best to help you do your best in applying to the AuSPEC Awards competition so that you can get your best scripts and get your best opportunity to do a good job in the competition. And so my name is Britton Payne. I'm the founder of the Autism Scene. I'm an entertainment attorney, mostly working in animation at places like Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers Animation. I did a little bit at DC Comics. And this competition is designed to try and get more explicitly autistic characters in kids' pop culture, specifically animation. That's the goal of the Autism Scene and of the AuSPEC Awards when it comes to animation. So I wanted to give our fellow panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. Kirk, you want to go first?
Hi, I'm Kirk Cushion. I've been working in the animation industry about 8 years. Before that, I was doing independent comics and working in advertising. So currently, I'm doing some story editing and working on several projects from like Paw Patrol. Hello Kitty's kind of my main thing. That's I've been on that show for about 5 years. So I like everybody. I work on a lot of different shows. So happy to be here and happy to help.
Thanks, Kirk. Naya?
Hi everyone, my name's Naya. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Brett. So I am a television writer as well as an actress, and I created the nonverbal character Nason for the Netflix animated series Ada Twist Scientist, and then had the opportunity to bring him back in a later episode. And I also do freelance writing, so I've written for Carl the Collector for PBS, which was a great experience. And I also work with my mom's nonprofit organization, Nason's Place, that helps children and families affected by autism get much needed resources and services in their community. So autism is very close to my heart as I have a little brother with autism. And so excited to be here and to help give you guys tips on how to win.
Thanks, Naya. Alyssa?
Hi guys, my name is Alyssa Feller. I'm a writer's assistant and writer. I've been in animation since 2019. I was a writer's assistant slash script coordinator slash freelance writer on Frog and Toad for Apple TV Plus. And I just finished up as a writer's PA on Universal Basic Guys, which is an adult animated show for Fox.
So the reason the three of you guys, I wanted to pull you on board is because you have experience doing the kinds of things that the people entering competition are trying to either get that experience or improve where they are in the animation industry, and that they can learn from your experiences, whether it is making choices or having choices made for you that you then had to accommodate. So I want to start with just talking about the competition and its purpose. So probably if you've gotten this far and you're watching the video, you may know some of this stuff. But the idea is it's an awards competition. It's going to be open for submissions between December 1, 2025 and January 31, 2026, with the awards ceremony happening on April 2. So the decisions will largely be made in February and March, figuring out who are the category winners. We've got about 15 categories that you can see listed on the website, but there are things like best sci-fi script and funniest script and spookiest script, best young kid script, also things like best non-speaking character, best use of an AAC device, and then there's going to be a grand prize that is for $5,000. Everybody who's a winner is going to get a meeting with somebody who theoretically could hire them in the real future. So it's not somebody who necessarily was doing hiring 10 or 15 years ago. It's not somebody who is working on some other kind of show who can give you just advice. It's somebody who at some point in the next year or two is likely to be staffing for a kids animated show. And so that's going to be with people who are running or working on shows like Avatar and Monster High. It's going to be representatives from agencies that place people in shows like this. So it's managers from places like Gersh and Gotham and Verve TLA, and then some animation executives. We're hoping to get people who are from Paramount and from Amazon and some of the other players in the space, in the hopes that by enticing you to, we want to entice you to enter this competition and do a good job so that we can put you in contact with people who could actually hire you and meaningfully give you work. Because the goal of the competition and of the nonprofit is to get more autistic characters into kids pop culture. And this is the way to do it. It's the writers to want to do it, executives to be willing to say yes, and to have the quality of scripts be really high that just happen to include autistic characters. So with that, one of the first things I want to ask, I'll start with Kirk and then just kind of go around the horn. What are you looking for when you are reading a script from somebody, particularly somebody you don't know, and you're considering whether or not that's somebody you want to hire on your show?
Well, it's always their voice. And everybody says this and it's very true. You can visually look at a script and tell if someone knows the basic rules. And a lot of this job is you're in service to who's hiring you. When you're starting out, you're thinking, "Oh, I've got this great idea. If I could just tell them this one idea, I know I could make SpongeBob even better." That's not what we're looking for when you're hiring someone. We're looking for someone who is number one, an idea generator, someone who can take notes. When I say, "Hey, that's great. A pony's great, but it needs to be a grapefruit," and they're like, "Hey, all right, I got five grapefruit pitches for you." So I'm looking for someone who's able to, it's really service industry. You're serving your boss. I'm serving my boss. My boss is serving somebody else. So there's a lot of people looking at your work. So believe it or not, follow the script format and you follow the rules to get in because that tells me that you have done your research. You've put enough care into putting a script that looks right. But then when I read it, I'm going to read it and see if you know the voice of the show. Do the characters sound right? SpongeBob is cursing like a sailor. That might be a job for Mr. Krabs, for example. But again, we're gonna do it they're gonna do it in a fun way on that show. So it's knowing the style, it's knowing the voice, and just being a good writer. So believe it or not, sometimes it's not the best idea, it's the best presentation, and you being able to hear the voice of a specific show. That will tell me a lot about you as an employee, which it's so essentially we're all trying to be employees. And that's the weird part about the job because we're all creative butterflies, but we're trying to work in a corporate environment, which is generally.
Naya, Naya, when you've gotten feedback on scripts that you've turned in to someone in somebody like Kirk's position, what kind of comments have you gotten and how did you respond to them to make your script more successful and more successful meaning it gets on the air?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's always too is when you start in the writer's room, and then like that's like the best place because if you have the opportunity to be in a writer's room, you're engaging with not just other writers from the room, but the story runner, the showrunner sometimes, but mainly the story editor, and so you kind of get to like pitch your idea, but then you guys are bouncing back and forth. So when I was pitching the character of Nason and we were kind of breaking that story down, it was really wonderful in the room to get real time feedback. Okay, like let's make sure that we don't have Nason off camera too much. Let's make sure that if we want to do, if this is what we call like an ABC story. So if this isn't like necessarily a full like Ada story or Iggy story or Rosie story, but we're kind of introducing this new character, how do we do it in a way where we keep our characters active? So it's almost like having conversations about how do we strike the balance of being true to the show, but also incorporating your new idea and what makes you special as a writer and creative. And when you get those notes, like Kirk was saying, like, hey, this might not work, being ready to be like, okay, let's throw paint to the wall and see what happens. And also being very comfortable not to get too down on yourself. When someone says, hey, because like everyone in that room wants an idea that's going to win. I think that's the most important thing. Like everyone in the room, I heard this early on, is in service of the greatest end product. So no one's going to tell you something that's going to make you look bad. That's going to make, it's not about that. It's about really doing the best thing for the show.
And Alyssa, so your experience of being in those kinds of rooms, the people who are entering this competition are not necessarily going to have the opportunity to be in those sort of rooms as they write their scripts. So what kinds of things do you think that you heard in those rooms that you think would be helpful to somebody in a competition like this to try and do what Naya was just talking about and feed something to somebody like Kirk where he can say, yeah, this makes sense?
Yeah, both off of both what Nia and Kirk said, I think being someone who's really receptive to notes is so important. It's just like in any job, if you are I don't know, a cashier at a store and somebody says like, "Hey, I need you to, try to upsell or something." Like that's just feedback and that's something you need to apply to your job. And I think also just besides the writing, which obviously is very important, just being somebody that other people want to be in a room with. There's a really great quote from Tina Fey. She said she hires writers that she could imagine walking down a hallway, seeing them at 2 a.m. and being excited to see them. Hopefully no one's working that late, but these projects you're working a lot of hours, you're working in a really tight-knit group, and you want people who, are good to work with, and there's so many times a conversation veers off from the show. We can get into personal topics or whatever. And you don't want to be that stick in the mud. You want to be someone that can contribute, that is a good person, that most importantly is someone in the back that's saying, "Oh, I want to work with them again." And that's how you get hired again onto the next show.
So given that a lot of people won't, this competition doesn't have a writer's room to be in.
Mm.
So what do you guys recommend for putting together groups of people that you can go over your work with? How do you guys start, assuming somebody doesn't have a group already of writer friends that they can share their stuff with? How do you start that in this day and age?
Well, when you live in LA, you're geographically blessed. So there's writers groups all over, and you just kind of get together with your peers. And so it's easier. It's harder if you don't live in Los Angeles. Um, but there's always the internet. That's great. That's a tool you have. But I'm gonna tell you, nothing beats in person. And if you seriously want to be a writer, you need to be in Los Angeles, and that should definitely be a goal. But if you can't, you can do it online, just like we're doing now. And it doesn't matter if you're all at the same level because you're always looking at like the top apple on the tree and hoping to pick that, but your ladder's not long enough. But when you look at your peers, your ladder's the same. Like one of my big goals in life, I always just joke about this, but I want to not work with Alyssa. I want to work for Alyssa because she would be a really fun boss. And I say that to her all the time. So again, the interpersonal becomes really important. More than I think even necessarily the work. It's the people you gel with. And you can start that online. So if you're in Arizona and feeling like, oh, well, I can't go to LA. Well, you will eventually. But put a note up in Barnes and Noble or Instagram. You just need to connect with people because it is a relationship business.
Yeah, how about you, Naya? Because I know you've got at least one writers group, right?
I do, but and that came out of when I was working at Netflix. We just kind of were working on a pitch. All of us got the opportunity to do a pitch, and so we were like, hey, like let's get together and like help each other out. Let's read each other's scripts. Let's help create, the room in which we can bounce ideas off of each other. Because being in the room, whether it's in person or virtual, it's always just an amazing experience, and I think it breeds the best work because you're really bouncing ideas off of other people. Even though sometimes writing is solitary when you're going through edits and you have to, hit deadlines. That's obviously a part of the process, but that initial and ongoing relationship with people in the room bouncing ideas is really critical. So I think writers groups are great. And I do love that the pandemic showed us how virtual writing groups can work. And, especially even living in LA, my writing group friends, we still meet virtual because we have so many different schedules and some people are in office, some people are working from home. And so it really does help. And so I would say if you don't have friends or other writers around you, to look online, to even look on Facebook, and sometimes be very specific in the kind of, maybe groups that you're looking for. If you're someone who loves like sci-fi animation, like look that up. If you're someone who, loves, if you're a Black woman in animation, there's spaces for that, women in animation. So looking for groups that you identify with, passions that are related to what you want, because the best thing that you can do as a writer is figure out how to artfully infuse who you are into the vision of the show. That's the balance I think we as writers always want to strike.
And
So
yeah, if
I have a
I
quick, yeah, go ahead, Alyssa.
I was going to say, if I can add on to that, like what Kirk was saying before, a lot of it is about notes. The best place you're going to get notes and learn how to do that is in a writer's group. It's the opportunity for someone to say, "Hey, I really like this character, but what if, I don't understand a little bit about their backstory?" And, it's these things you never really thought of where you're like, "Yeah, that is a good point. That's something to infuse." And if there's one more thing I can add on, the only reason I got that last job I worked on Universal Basic Guys is because I was in a writer's group. One of the people in the group worked on the show. He sent me a text one day and said, "Hey, we're staffing up a new season. We need a writer assistant. Send me your resume ASAP." That job was never posted. It was never put online. I would have never gotten that job if I was not in that writer's group with that one friend.
Wow, that's great. I mean, I that is something that I try to talk to people about. I don't have the same experience you guys do, but I hear what you guys say, and the way people get work does seem to be a lot through connections. occasionally you get somebody who reaches out to try to find somebody new for their writer's room, but that's still really hard. That's not their primary job. They're not HR people. They're writers, who got into a position where they can hire other writers. So having your social groups and nurturing those kinds of things might even be a challenge for you because of the way your personality is built, but it is extremely important. And so it's worth trying to exercise that muscle. Um, I have a question about an 11-minute script, like just a nuts and bolts thing with somebody describing like how long is it, and what are any tricks for building it that you need to think about? Biting off more than you can chew seems like it might be a problem in an 11. Um, and just and especially because seems like it's largely going to be introducing a new character in an 11-minute script. So can one of you talk about the sort of the bones of that kind of a thing, and how do you build an 11-minute script? What are the parts?
I can speak a little bit too, and excited to hear Alyssa and Kirk's thoughts on it as well. But for me, especially, I started as a script coordinator on Ada. So I started as a script coordinator, so I was reading a lot of scripts. And before Ada, I was on live action. I was working on soap operas. So it was a very different jump. But working in soap operas, it's such a fast-paced environment that when you come to animation, there is a little bit of a slowness to it that allowed for me to really learn and study the structuring of an 11-minute script. And so I will say, the tight script's 15 pages. We do usually have about 16 to 17 pages in maybe the first or second draft, just so that you can kind of like get everything out that you want. And then when we do our table reads is usually when we cut it down. And I would recommend start with an outline. I think it's always ambitious. I've done it myself, and always go back to go to the outline, starting with a blank page and trying to write dialogue, especially if this is your first time, is just not even if it's your first time, it's just not the best idea. So I would really start with that outline, about a 4-page outline that breaks up the beats and the acts. So there's 3 acts within the story, and you really want to bake it out. Usually there's about maybe 3 to 4 beats, be A, B, 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 C within each act. So start with your 4-page outline in crafting the story. And then when you have that really solid, then you start your script process. And then as you're going through your script process, the tip I would give is recognize that you don't have a lot of time. Like 11 minutes, if it sounds short, because it is. 15 pages, if it sounds short, because it is. So you have to be very mindful about introducing the characters, and especially because you're going to be basically doing a spec script, you're going to be doing a script with the show that already exists. You don't have to do too much of establishing characters, that's already there, but you want to get to the meat of this, of the meat of the story quickly, right? By page 2, honestly, by the end of page 2, 3, if you're really saying something, is when we're like, okay, what's the problem? What are we doing? Where are we going? And so you really want to break it down that way, so that by the end of page, maybe 6-ish, that's about halfway, or probably a little bit 5.5 page, we're at the halfway point where we had a second low, right? And so you really just want to be mindful of structuring it out that way. So those are just some of my tips, but I know Kirk and Alyssa have more to share.
I think you said it all. I mean, it's that's very thorough. I think the one advice I would give is you need to start your story, and you did hit on this, as soon as you can, because you don't have time, and you need to, basically they can't go, gee, I wonder, if it's going to rain today. You need to start with them looking for their umbrella because it's raining. So, you have to be really tight with your story. That would be my main advice. Get into it as soon as you can.
Yeah, I yes and all that. Something that really helps me is reading existing scripts. Um, and I say that and knowing it's kind of a hard thing to do. Unfortunately, there are not that many 11-minute show scripts floating around out there. But if you can, it's a great resource, because what I'll do is really look at each page and be like, okay, the inciting incident started on page 2. Okay, the conflict resolved on page whatever, and really try to outline, and especially if you're writing a spec script, really try to match it. If this inciting incident happened by this page, then try to get it on that page. One resource I would recommend is the Writers Guild of America Library. It's out in Los Angeles. I will say, because most animated shows are on the Animation Guild, and because the Writers Guild Library is completely volunteer based, it's not like they have a record of everything. It's all people submitting their own scripts to it. It doesn't have everything, but it has quite a few things. Last time I was there, for example, I saw they had all of season 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. But if you can find those scripts, it's just such a great resource to have.
Oh, that's really great. We're going to try and put up a few samples on the website might be an 11-minute script. I really like the idea, Naya, of the outline, that maybe you could put up the outline and then having as many samples as we can get up, even if it's only one. I think that'd be something that's worth looking at. One of the things that is central to the competition, of course, is having an explicitly autistic character. So I have a couple notions about what that means when I say explicitly autistic character and the rules. It means you're going to use the word autistic, you're going to use the word spectrum. There might be some other way to do it, but the importance of in this competition, and I guess my personal opinion, in having having the character's autism be explicit is so that a neurotypical, I'm sorry, having them be explicit is so that a neurotypical viewer can understand that the character who they're seeing their buddy interact with is autistic. And that way, that character might be able to then go to school or go into the world. We're talking about kids' animation. So it's about kid viewers can be able to go and see their peers who also have the same name associated with them, autistic, and can maybe translate the empathy that they see from the screen into empathy for the kid who's around them who has the same name on it. So, um, what Naya, you're the one who's got the experience in creating an autistic character for Ada to a Scientist, and then separately writing an autistic character in Carl the Collector, explicitly autistic in both cases. What kinds of things did you find useful as you were building the character, the autistic character, that you hoped to inject into a show?
Yeah. So for me, the first episode of television ever, I introduced a nonverbal character with autism. And that was from my personal experience. I have a younger brother who has autism. And so I knew quite intimately some of the characteristics of autism. I knew how it appeared with my brother, but because I also worked with my mom and her organization with Nissan's Place, we have so many kids and adults who autism appears presents differently, right? So I personally just had a very unique understanding that autism is a spectrum. It doesn't look one way. And so when creating a character with autism, even though of course I was, using experiences from my brother, I also wanted to do some research and figuring out whether other ways that I could represent not even just represent autism, but teach people, especially young kids, about what it could look like in the world so that when they encounter it, to your point, Britt, they're able to be like, oh, someone's using a tablet because that helps them talk, right? And so those were some of the things that I was thinking about. How do I use my lived experience, but also do my research to make sure that I'm trying my best to explain that autism isn't a one size fits all? Because I think that is sadly a trope. Like people think, okay, there's 4 characteristics of someone with autism, and so we're just gonna kind of recreate that, until we run out of shows, right? And that's just so not true. I mean, people with autism at the end of the day are people, and us as people, we have different quirks and traits and different things that inform who we are and how we move through the world. And so creating a character with autism isn't a hard thing. It's just about learning a new person and learning the way they move through the world and how you can incorporate that into a show.
One of the ways that I think any affinity group, but specifically thinking about autistic characters, can be presented, there's sort of 3 categories that I tend to talk about when I talk about these kinds of things at Comic-Cons and other places, is coded membership in the group. So the autism is coded, where that means that they never explicitly say it. That's kind of like the guys in Big Bang Theory or Wednesday Addams. And then there is explicit without obstacle. And that's an example using a different kind of example. If you have a dog in an anthropomorphic dog show, like a Paw Patrol type show, where one of the dogs is introduced and has wheels in the back, and that dog can play soccer and climb stairs without obstacle, you are seeing the representation of the character. It is explicit that this character is disabled and has wheels, but you're not seeing any obstacle. So it's sort of it's nice in some ways, right? Because it means that the dog is showing like, oh, anything they can do, I can do also. So that's really nice and inspirational, but it also doesn't reflect the full experience. And then you can have autism with obstacle, where you see both the attributes of autism, the way it presents in a particular character, that could be helpful, but also sometimes that will become an obstacle, make it a little more challenging to move through the world. So a pretty good example of both of those things is Twyla Boogeyman in Monster High, where she is shy and she stims and she plays with her bracelets and she has a challenge with making eye contact, but that she also has really fun insights and she's fun to be around. And so they invite her to the sleepover and they learn a little bit more about autism, but really it's about making a new friend. So thinking about those kinds of ways to present autism, um, Kirk, what are some things that you would be looking for as a judge in the competition if you were trying to decide, like, oh, this representation is interesting to me or this representation doesn't quite work?
I think what you're pointing out for Monster High, where it does need to be overt, because as a writer, and when you have experience with someone with autism in your life, you start seeing the spectrum in every single character you write. So you start kind of seeing it everywhere. Like, oh, wait a minute, I see. So all your characters are kind of doing that, but the point of this competition is to introduce a character. So I think you want to go ahead and do that and be very, very specific about it and blend them in. So Monster High is a great example for that. So don't be too subtle, but also don't be too stereotypical. Like Naya was saying, do your research. And it becomes easy because when you have someone in your family that way, you're like, oh, wait a minute. But the last thing I'd say on that is make it a positive because again, like Naya was saying, I've seen in my own life, um, that autism does come with gifts, not magical gifts necessarily, but don't make them they can fix everything because it's a superpower. But I'm looking for something where it's positive, where yeah, you have these obstacles, but you do still get invited to the sleepover. So make it a positive and uplifting situation. So when someone on the spectrum or someone learning about the spectrum is watching your episode, that they go, oh, okay, that person has challenges, but oh wow, they bring someone to the party. So I would be looking for that.
Lisa, when you see a new character get introduced, what how do you introduce that character, especially economically in an 11-minute script? What kinds of things have you been able to see when new characters come in and you say, oh, that right away I connected with that character, I understood who they were?
That's a really good question. I think a great thing about animation is that it's also a visual medium. You'll meet a lot of writers and read a lot of guides about, how much action line do you put inside a script. You don't want to create, whole paragraphs, but at the same time, there's a lot that can be done visually. Um, I know something that kind of bothers me a little bit for any character is it's like, oh yeah, that's John. John's backstory is this, and it's just an introduction. It's like no one ever talks about that. I don't say, meet my friend Kirk, he's 5'7", or whatever, like so to find like a natural way, but also maybe a way you can use the visual animation as a visual medium to kind of introduce the character visually and also just in a natural way.
It's a really good point. I mean, given that this is a writer's competition, there's an inclination that you think you can get it all done with words, but don't forget the other tools you have at hand, including animation. One of the things that we've talked about is that what is the idea of which is more important, voice of the show or the representation of autism. And I have an answer to that, but my answer is more about the advocacy part of things. I think hopefully after I get my answer, you guys can talk about the aesthetic part of it a little bit, which is that the show has to, if the show is lovely, if the character is lovely and the writing doesn't fit the voice of the show, then it doesn't get to the air. It doesn't. It can't go on air, and as a result, it stays in a drawer somewhere, and it doesn't do any good for the advocacy part of this thing, right? It doesn't get a new character on screen. Whereas if it is a really good script and the representation of autism is, authentic, but not necessarily as groundbreaking as it could be, well, that maybe does better because the script still survives and it shows that you can have an explicitly autistic character that works perfectly with the voice of the script. Now, if you're presented with two scripts that nail the voice and one is more ambitious in its representation of autism, then maybe that has a leg up in the competition. But I think my instinct is that the thing needs to prove that autistic characters can be on the air in anything. They can be on the air in a spooky show, in a funny show, in a romance show, in a sci-fi show, in a little kids show. Anywhere that you have characters, you can have autistic characters. With that said, like, what do you guys see as the subtleties of trying to balance the advocacy of the competition and and what will constitute success in writing a script?
I think It has to be a great script. It has to be something that grabs your attention, and then obviously do your homework. So make it it's always story, because if your episode is not engaging, people aren't going to watch it. It's not going to get produced. Like you said, it's going to be in the drawer. So, bring your best writer self. Um, Let me add this real quick. Is like Alyssa was saying, we have access to the Writers Guild library, which is fantastic. If you don't, if you're, and I always think of the guy in Michigan watching this going, well, I don't have this, Alyssa said this, Nye said this, Kirk said this, I'm hopeless, I'm going to quit. I'm going to tell you, I would sit down. One time I got a job writing a Hallmark movie. So I sat down and timed it out, and I basically made my own script of it. And I did the beats by time. So there's ways for you to do all the things we're talking about. You can order a script online, read a script for anything, see what the dialogue looks like. Again, use your resources to do your research and to make an engaging story, because you can do it with what you have at hand. So don't be discouraged when we give you pro tips. You'll file those away, but you've got a lot of resources to help you make a great story that's going to get our attention. And again, just make that authentic character like we're talking about.
Yeah, and I would add on too, if you don't, because I think it's such a great point, recognizing like, okay, what if you don't have access to these libraries? What can you do? I think also watching 11-minute shows would be super, super helpful, because that way too, it might even give you ideas or inspiration for how can I show creatively within a script, a plot point, or even what's going on in someone's head. Like when I wrote the character of Nathan, when we did that episode, I wanted to show a spectrum, but I didn't want to say, kids lives on a spectrum. I wanted to, how do I show that visually to kids? So it was like a rainbow that appeared and then it lit up as, Ada was talking about it. And so I think watching a lot of 11-minute episodes of television will be very helpful in taking notes while you're watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you don't have the 15 pages, but just check the timing of it. Okay, about 2 minutes in, that's when things started to go left, right? And then by minute 7 is when, okay, there's hope, but then something happens. So I would highly recommend watching. And then also I think the challenge and why the winner of this competition will win is because they will not be writing a script to just put a character with autism in it. They'll be writing a great script and show the ease in which it is to infuse a character with autism. Like that's what's going to win this competition, is doing both seamlessly.
So we're down to the last couple of minutes of this. I wanted to just raise the issue of you're trying to thread a needle as you write this script. You're trying to introduce an autistic character in a way that is not a very special episode of Rugrats, but also is not fanfic. And so it really, we are talking about making a real episode of a real show that is currently in production. You may love the Flintstones, but it might not be the best idea to write a Flintstone script if there's no Flintstone script, a Flintstones show currently in production. On the website, we've got a list in the FAQs of the shows that we know of that are currently in production. It's not the only thing that you can do, but we're trying to put you in a position where you could get hired. So if you're writing for a show that isn't on the air, and that there's not necessarily, it might be a decent comp script that you can use for trying to get on some other show. But we really want to try and funnel you into the shows that are currently on the air, and maybe that can help you. Also, having a spec script like this is a good way. It's one of the things you'll want to show no matter who you're meeting with. Nobody's looking at just one writing sample. The reason, if you don't know, that we chose 11 is because that's half of 22, and there are 22 minutes in a broadcast half hour, with the other 8 minutes being advertisements, and that's based on federal stuff. So when we say an 11, that's like the first half of an episode of SpongeBob. We also recommend that you're not writing for SpongeBob because it's a singular voice and isn't necessarily going to be a good sample to get you hired on another show. And the SpongeBob show, as lovely as it is, doesn't hire new writers and hasn't really hired new writers in 25 years. But some of the other shows that are out there that you could write a script for will get you closer to hiring. And they'll also, have the voice of current shows that are currently in production, so that you can demonstrate that you've done those kinds of things. Any closing words before we get cut off?
So just one last thing before we go. I did just want to say or suggest, when you do pick what script you're going to do a spec for, I would really recommend watching the episodes, and particularly watching them for episodes that focus on each character. Because often in kids TV, you'll have a story like Ada example. We have a story where it's the Ada's episode, or it's Iggy's episode, or Rosie's episode. So you really get a great sense of that character, of their catchphrases, of their family, of kind of who makes them or what makes them what they are. And so if you're watching an episode per main character, then I think you'll better be able to find the voice of the show when you're writing yours. You kind of can infuse that. That's the best way I think to figure out the voice of a show, is to watch an episode from the perspective of each main character. So that would be the bit of advice I'd give.
That's great. Alyssa and Kirk, did you have any closing thoughts you wanted to pop out?
Just do your homework. To kind of attach to what I had just said is I started writing on a show about a third season. I went back on my own and I watched all 52 episodes of the previous seasons, and I didn't really tell anybody, I just mentioned it. Well, because of that, they knew I was really serious. I didn't really do it to show them. I did it for my homework because you have to do your homework in this job. But then I was the only writer. The director found out and said, "Man, this guy's serious." So they started letting me go to the records for my episodes. And just because, so sometimes when you do your homework, it not helps you win a competition, but it helps you build those relationships. It helps you do better scripts. So my advice would be just do your homework for this competition, know the show, know the character you're gonna do the outline. Like that was really great now because I used to think I didn't need to outline, but you do have to absolutely 100% outline if you're a professional in this industry. So you better do your outline, and we can put up a sample of that, I'm sure, Britt, right?
Yeah,
So
we'll get that up.
just use all your tools and good luck. You can do it.
Yeah, and I'll just say off of Kirk and off of Naya, there are so many resources out there. Excuse me. Not as many, unfortunately, for 11-minute scripts, but if you're just starting out and you're totally new to like a screenwriting software, for example, there's so many great resources about learning how to format everything. And it sounds really elementary, but if you're submitting something to a script writing contest, you want your script to look polished and look as good as it can. You know, you have to make a good first impression. If the first line, everything is off a little bit, that's not going to make a great impression. And also, another great thing that always helps me, if you can find a writer's group or even just get some of your friends together, have everyone read the script out loud, like a table read, and really close your eyes and think, like, can I imagine this character saying this? If you're doing Bluey, for example, close your eyes. Does that sound like Bluey? Does that sound like Bingo? Um, just think about that and try to get the character's voice and the look and the feel of the show. Um, and and sorry, I don't know where to end that, but yeah, just
No,
really try
that's
your
all
best to
really
really find the voice of the show and your own voice.
that's really great. I just my last quick question to you guys, each of you is, what is the most fun part of writing a script like this, and what is the least fun part
Of writing a script in general or writing.
of a script like this? So if you're sitting down doing an 11, it's kind of an assignment. You have to include an explicitly autistic character meaningfully interacting with the series regular. So when you're writing an 11, what part is the fun part, and what part is the all right? I guess I have to plow through this.
I think for me, the hardest part is remembering to like kill your darlings. Like I think sometimes you want to just cram everything in, like every joke, every idea, everything. And it just will not make for a great script. So that can be hard for me because I just love putting everything all in one little box. So I think that would be the hardest thing about 11 minutes, is just really, doing the work to keep it tight. But when you do, your script will be better for it. And I think the best part of writing a script like this one, and I think about when I pitched Nason and when I wrote that script, was just the joy in being able to show the world that people with autism are not just in our world, but can thrive in it, can be great, fun friends. And I think that's what is really exciting about writing a script like this, because it's going to be good. It's going to be good for you. It's going to be good for everyone reading it and one day watching it.
I think just overall, I'm not answering your question really, but whether you win this competition or don't even place, you win when you enter and you write a script, because this script becomes part of your sample. This is going to be a script you use to go to your next script and your next script and your next script. And it is a relationship business. So again, whether you win the big prize and you get to shake hands with Brit on a stage in April, or you don't even place, that's okay, because every time you write a script, you get better, you meet more people. So when you write that script and you finish that script and you polish it and it looks great and you enter it and you did your best, you already won.
That's great. That's great. Alyssa, what's the most and least fun, or a different thought?
Gosh, just something about spec scripts in general. I love writing spec scripts because I'm a fan of these shows. And like there's a lot of shows where I'm like, oh man, I wish I could like write for that show. And now is your chance to pretend you are.
Mm.
For example, it's not a children's show. It's very much not a children's show, but I love the show What We Do in the Shadows. I wrote a spec script. I submitted to the Austin Film Festival. I got into the second place competition. But really, the fun thing was, I love that show. I think the characters are so great and fun. So, like, to sit down and be like, I'm going to write my own version of like one of my favorite shows. Like, it's kind of a joy. I will say the most challenging thing for me, at least, is when you stare at Final Draft and there's all that white space, all that empty page. For me, the hardest thing is just physically getting the script done. I think once it's done and once you can edit and change things, add new jokes, that's the easy part. So it's just physically writing the script, but you just got to get through it. You got to get through it, and then it gets a lot easier after that.
Wow, that's great. It was really great to have all of you guys helping people out to do better in this competition. So it's the AuSPEC Awards, as you probably know if you're watching this video, and the autismscene.org is a place that we're building to try and give you the resources you need to successfully add explicitly autistic characters to kids' pop culture, including these animated shows. So if you go there, you can take a look at a couple of presentations that I've done, some of which are with Naya, and that will detail the history of autistic characters in comic books, and how to authentically create autistic characters, giving you access all in one place targeted to your goal, which is to create a new script, to create a new character. That's a glossary of terms that you often find in autism, and certain tropes that maybe you want to consider, and ways that executives who are making decisions about scripts that include autistic characters will consider it. The way things work, hiring an autism consultant is becoming a fairly common thing that studios will do if they're working on materials that has autistic characters in it. And so there are a lot of resources that you can find at the autismscene.org. I encourage you to poke around and see which ones are the ones that resonate with you, which ones spark ideas in you where you say like, oh, I really hadn't thought about doing it this particular way, having a romance where what's it like if my series regular falls in love with an autistic character, and finding ideas and research, shortening your research process to make it easier for you to write the best script that you can, so that collectively this project can get more explicitly autistic characters into pop culture, and into the places where people are already going, into video games and opera and podcasts and who knows what else. Every place that people go to consume their pop culture, there should be autistic characters, because there are autistic people everywhere in the world. And hopefully this overall will give you the opportunity to have more empathy for inclusion and accommodation for the people around you who need it, whether they're autistic or they have some other accommodation they need, even if they have no affliction at all, but they just need a little extra consideration. That's overall a really good thing. I think that I'm doing it through the lens of autism because of my personal experiences. But I think overall, even just participating in the competition can open your eyes to certain things that'll hopefully help you see the world in a way that lets you appreciate things more and have a richer experience and a fuller experience with all the people who are around you, including the autistic people who you maybe hadn't had interactions with before. So thank you for taking the time to watch the video. Kirk, Nye, and Alyssa, thank you so much for participating in this conversation. And hopefully we will see a lot of great um, contributions to the competition with terrific results. And I hope that everybody who gets involved really enjoys their time doing it, finds it really meaningful in a lot of different ways, including ways that help your career. So thank you guys. And if we get a chance, we'll do this one again. Bye, everybody.